2020, that wonderful year. uh, um, for Cancer Book Club, our Cancer Book Club interview this month is with Barbara Caplan-Bennett with regard to her book, Noseworthy, How I Battled Melanoma by Giving Up My Nose to Save My Life. Welcome, Barbara. Thank you for joining us here at Cancer Book Club today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So your book is one of the few that has been published in COVID times. And when we trace it, you were talking about, I went through all this, and now here I'm dealing with this pandemic. So this is a recent publication, right? So when did it come out? It came out.
Yes, July. It came out in July.
Yeah. So
So for people who haven't read the book, give us a little bit of background on the story.
Well, in 2011, after 5 or 6 years of having some minor issues, well, not so minor, skin cancer, squamous cell, basal cell, where they, did little minor techniques to remove it. And we thought we were done with it. And suddenly I was, I had what I thought were freckles on my nose, and I just was so tired of people telling me I had dirt on my nose that I went to my dermatologist and said, please get rid of this. What can we do? And he biopsied it. And long story short, which is long in the book, it turned out to be melanoma. He thought it was not very deep. He thought the fix was easy. Well, it wasn't. It was actually much deeper than they thought. It was a very difficult to diagnose form of melanoma called desmoplastic melanoma, which is very aggressive locally, but thank goodness, very slow to metastasize. So on the one hand, that's great news for me, and it had not traveled. The aggressiveness locally, though, did mean that my best chance at survival, because ultimately it will move to the lungs and the bones and maybe the brain, but the best chance of survival was to remove my entire nose, because otherwise it would just keep coming back. And as the surgeon put it, in 5 years, we'll be planning your remaining time instead of having lunch with your husband. So, that was the choice we were given, and the choice to me was obvious. And I did consult a few other people, and everyone agreed with melanoma. To cut is to cure. It's your best chance.
Yeah.
And so the book is well, let me take a step back. There's something that many of you may or may not be familiar with, the Caring Bridge website for people with chronic medical issues, for your family and friends to check in and see how you're doing. And I'm a writer, and that suddenly became my daily journal. And it was a wonderful release and outlet for me to put all my thoughts and feelings. And everybody kept saying, you got to make this a book. You got to make this a book. And when the year was over and I was kind of back to my new normal life, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was think about it long enough to write turn it into a cohesive piece. So fast forward, I'm at home. I'm in lockdown in Southern California for COVID, with, kind of tired of cleaning bathrooms and kitchens and crossword puzzles and Scrabble. And it suddenly dawned on me at 4 a.m., oh my God, now is the time to write the book. And that's what I did.
You mentioned the kind of emotional difficulties of revisiting that time. What did you experience?
It was fascinating that I had forgotten so much of what I had experienced. There were obvious things that, of course, you remember, the highlights and the really lowest lows, but there were a lot of small details that day-to-day experiences that I just completely had forgotten. And reading about them again was very impactful. And in some cases, I cried when I read some of it, because it was like, oh my God, oh yeah, oh that. And some of it made me laugh, and because it was just the absurdity of the whole thing was at times funny. But it was a very emotional, much more so than I anticipated, because I thought, oh, I remember it all. Well, I didn't.
No, I think it's a self-preservation that we don't
Yes.
remember a lot of these things, because I know when I go back and I read things, sometimes it's like, oh my God, how did I survive that?
Yes. And particularly the thing that I had forgotten the most was the anxiety of every time I got a question answered, another one appeared. And it was months before I felt like I was really clear of my situation and that everything was going to be a good outcome. So that was probably the hardest thing.
Today, at the time, and that's the thing about, I like you have written a book that was sort of based on a journal sort of blog thingy. And the thing that's different is when you're writing the blog, you don't know what's coming. In retrospect, you do know this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So you can kind of integrate the future from the point of that blog into your rewriting of the blog. So it's a little different when
Yes.
you don't, none of us have the crystal ball. You certainly didn't when you were writing those blog posts.
No.
So
no.
now you
And
kind of have a bit of a ball because you know what did happen in real
right.
life.
But
When
I
happened.
also did the book, what the new pieces that I did in the book were to really set up the before, what had happened before, and then at the end to tell everybody, because now I'm 10 years down the road, I could give everybody a great, especially those who are experiencing any kind of similar thing, that here I am 10 years down the road and basically living a very wonderful, normal, happy, I'll be happier when I can go to restaurants and movies, but very happy life.
Yeah, and I guess that's the a point I kind of wanted to draw attention to, because I think the question of disfigurement is something that all cancer patients deal with, some more than others. So, in your book, you talk about a little bit about the contrast with breast cancer versus, a facial type cancer. And when I was going through I had colorectal cancer, as you see, I'm in active treatment now. When I first went in, about the same as you, 10 years ago, they told me that the head and neck cancers have higher anxiety than any other kind.
Wow.
Closer to your personhood, if it's closer to your brain. So brain, throat, as you say, nose, mouth, all of those people who have cancers that afflict their head and neck are far, far, far more psychologically and emotionally impacted than, and that's a lot to sing a lot, because when we talk, of course, to breast cancer people all the time who have to struggle with that disfigurement. I have an ostomy, there's a disfigurement, that's a permanent thing for me. Like, there's lots and lots of ways in which cancer patients their body is altered. And even if those are not altered on the outside, as far as outward appearance, vastly altered in terms of function. So people have broken bone and ache and fatigue and all these other problems. So I guess so your book deals with the disfigurement question right up front, which is one of the, what I think is one of the,
right up front, quite literally.
yes. And what I found, this was rewarding to read, not rewarding for you to undergo it, is how explicit you were about the emotion, how many times you broke down crying, you're crying on there, you're crying here, how on the surface one's emotions are going to be when you're confronted with something as drastic as what you encountered.
Well, and just to make sure that I hope people understand that, yes, there was a lot of crying, but I hope that my humorous moments and the lighter moments and the way that I counterbalanced that crying, it's not a downer book to read, is what I want.
No.
It has good energy to it. It's actually almost chipper, is the way I thought of it. And I was, and I know underneath all that lies an incredible journey and a lot of pain and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear.
A lot of fear. Yeah. So I have always been somebody I'm lucky this way. I don't know why I am this way, but I've always been somebody who has made a point of not letting my life be guided by fear. I try and meet the fear. I mean, there's good fear that keeps you from doing stupid stuff, although I did a fair amount of that in my youth. But but I didn't want to live. I mean, I know lots of people with all sorts of different kinds of cancers, and many of them, just as the expression is, sally forth into life and want to make the most of every day because of the uncertainty that we all kind of live with underlying. But there's a few people that the fear just rules their life, and I feel bad for them. It feels like a lost opportunity. And that, of course, is once you're done with treatment. While you're going through treatment, there's kind of no way to get rid of the fear. You're just living with it on a day-to-day basis. But when you're done, if you are blessed and fortunate enough to be declared cancer-free, and I wasn't entirely, I mean, they did not get clean margins from me, but they felt very good about my chances and my prognosis. Once you've reached that point, you can't keep looking back. You can't keep saying, and letting every little spot, every little thing terrify you, because you can't enjoy life that way. And if you've been given the gift of being here, still, you better, pardon the expression, you better damn well enjoy it.
Yeah, I think there are more than a few people who get stuck. I always liken it to coming to a fork in the road. And some people pause at the fork and they're just stalled. Some people take the left-hand side, which is like the dark night of the soul, and they may or may not come out. And then there are other people who see it as a pivot into an appreciation of life, if you will. And
Yes.
the thing is, how do you move, how do you help move people over into that side of appreciation? Because it's all you have.
Yeah. And I don't know. The few people that I've known that have been very fearful and have chosen that dark side, I have not found a very successful way. I think it's, something that therapy helps. And I don't, and I'm pretty good with people, but if somebody's really holding on to their fear like a pacifier, it's pretty hard to wrestle it from them.
At the same time, I think people's cancer journeys take them through seasons. And so some people do feel intense fear and intense despair. They don't always feel that. They, as you say, even in your own book illustrates the fear and despair that goes with not having a clear surgical plan. Once you had that, it's a lot easier to proceed once you have a plan. And I know roughly what your course will be. So, I sometimes, I don't ever kind of get mad at cancer patients for having the feelings they feel. They're going to feel the way they feel, right? Because as you say, it's a marathon. Therefore, you're going to have your phases. Sometimes you're going to be in despair, and sometimes you're going to be in appreciation.
Absolutely. And as I said, during treatment, it's pretty impossible to not have the fear during treatment and shortly thereafter. And yes, look, even for me, even though I don't think that it, rules my life, there are moments. And I had one the other day. There was some boy, being on the internet is both a blessing and a curse. I read on some site on Facebook, some person was talking about how melanoma is famous for returning 10 to 15 years later. Even if you've only had stage 1, suddenly, boom, they find it in your lungs, they find it in your brain, and out of the blue. And my oncologist, when I first started seeing him, I had to switch oncologists because my former one had retired, said to me, melanoma is a cancer of tragic surprises. And I looked at him and I said, well, I'm not going to be one of them. But when I read that on Facebook, it all came back. It was like, oh my God,
I really am vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah, I am still vulnerable. And I kind of told my husband, and he kind of, bless his heart, he rolled his eyes and he looked at me. He said, really, you're going to go there now after suddenly you've been great for years, and all of a sudden, he said, what good is that going to do you? And I knew that, but I still had to have my little feelings,
You have
and
to
I had to kind
process
of
it.
work through that.
Yeah.
And then I moved on, I went back to work. Taking care of the cats and the dog and having my life. And then you kind of forget about it. But the reminders, boy, they bring that fear back in a flash. And then you have to kind of power through it again.
I was
So
talking
I'm
to
sure we all have that.
Oh, absolutely. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about the road that you travel post-treatment, actually, and how it is so unpredictable in that you may actually be happy, very happy and going along with life for several years. And then as you're saying, here you are, year 10, and man, something just slams you. I find it just fascinating. And then you process it, you pick yourself up and you go on. And I just find it fascinating that at any point in this time frame, we are all subject to all these different feelings coming back. And at every point, I think it's an opportunity to choose that path of, grateful for life and everything else. But it takes resilience to do that, don't you think?
Yes, I do. And some people have more of it than others, through no great fault or achievement of their own. I think those of us who have it, it's a lifelong thing. It's instilled in us by parents. Sometimes it's instilled in us by the support we have from the loved ones around us. I don't think many of us are resilient in a vacuum. But I want to share something my dear friend Nancy said when I was shortly after I was going through this, and we were having drinks, I believe cocktails, and she's a double mastectomy survivor, and we were kind of talking about this subject, the fear, and do we ever really get clear of it? And she kind of laughed and she said, the truth is everybody is in the same position we are, where at a moment's notice it could change and they could be diagnosed. They just don't know it,
Yeah.
and we do. That's the difference. And I loved that she said that. So hats off, Nance.
And with respect to what you were saying about a vacuum, one of the other strong points of your book, my husband would have been jealous how often you mention him by way of, like, almost every chapter is like, he's my rock, he's holding me together, he's, and he definitely set the bar very high for spousal support.
I know. He was a little mad at me. He said, you gave an image of me I can't live up to.
but it's your subjective. You really, really did rely on his support and his sense of humor and all these other things. And so
Yes.
that really does come across in the book. And so, again, resilience, just like you say, you're not resilient in a vacuum. You have your immediate personal family supports,
Yes.
as well as social supports like Nancy and others on the outside. So
I think my story would have been very different if I were not fortunate enough to have Paul as my husband. I'm very lucky. And I didn't find him until I was 41. So there you go. Single ladies who are in your 40s, you can get lucky too.
there's a song in there.
Don't
make me sing and dance.
One of the things I loved about this book is it tackles a much more rare cancer, if you will. Not that, we hear a lot about breast cancer and some of the other cancers that are maybe a little bit more in the news, but we don't hear a lot about head and neck cancer or the impact of melanoma, really.
I understand melanoma at the time I was diagnosed is one of the big nasty five.
Mm-hmm.
Pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, melanoma, I believe colon cancer, that, and I can't remember the fifth one, but the big five that if you catch them early, maybe it was ovarian cancer, that the survival rate for late stage discoveries is tough. And in the 10 years since I was diagnosed, that has all changed. And
Mhm.
melanoma now has some very successful treatment options. People are being diagnosed at stage 4 and being able to successfully treat. And that's just amazing and
It's
wonderful.
one of the few cancers with a clear checkpoint inhibitor so that they can use immunotherapy now. So
Immunotherapy, exactly.
I had a number of stage 4 cases just in my neighborhood where they had it in their bones and everything, and then they did immunotherapy. It's all gone. So
Yeah.
they're totally cured. So
Yeah.
that's not to say it's not, it's got to be arrested at the early stages as much as possible. But not everybody can tolerate an immunotherapy. So
Yes.
there's
It's not an answer for everyone.
lethality to it, no question. But there's one of the cancers that has the greatest amount of progress in terms of the chemotherapy options or the
Absolutely.
immunotherapy options.
Yeah.
Now, you were so lucky to be in LA where you have great medical care. What happens to people when they're off in these tertiary areas where they don't have the quality of care that you have in a big urban area?
They sadly, unless they have a lot of money and can travel, because there are several hubs around the country where they do really incredible prosthetic work. Obviously, New York, I believe Boston and Chicago. And I'm not sure, but I think there are places, I don't remember whether it's Dallas or Houston, but one of the big cities in Texas that have great prosthetic centers. And I've heard from some of these people, I got an email from somebody in Nebraska. We don't know what to do. It's unfortunate, but what ends up happening is the way that I look now, it's amazing. It's a miracle. And what they do in places where they don't have the skills and the trained people to do it, they end up with something not quite so aesthetically pleasing. I'm looking for a kind way to put it. I have seen pictures of prosthetic noses that are kind of blobs on the face. Although I will say this, more and more across the country, trained prosthodontists are relocating into areas where there had been none before. And in fact, my first prosthodontist at UCLA is now in Nebraska and training people to do what he has done. So it's getting better, but I don't know what the answer is, because a lot of people have said to me, why didn't you get plastic surgery? Why didn't you let them rebuild a nose? That was the big question. I didn't, because at that time, 10 years ago, a handful of people all across the country, none of them in Los Angeles, that could really do a terrific rebuilding of a nose. It takes 8 to 10 surgeries, if you're lucky, over the course of a year and a half. High rate of failure. The shrinkage changes everything. There's the potential for infection and rejection of tissue that's been grafted. I just wanted to get back to my life. And everybody said, this is the best way to do it. And now, of course, 10 years later, they're experimenting with all sorts of things, 3D printing of noses that they then attach. I mean, it's just kind of just getting better and better. But to answer your question, I really don't know what people who are in the middle of Oklahoma do, or somewhere in some mountain community in Appalachia. I don't know. A lot of them hide themselves away because they never get an aesthetically acceptable way to fix their face.
Yeah, and it's not just cancer patients in it with facial disfigurement. There are people with congenital issues or
Yes.
war injuries and other things. So I love it that the science has evolved.
Yes.
Cancer adds another layer of complication to it, because if you should get a plastic surgery and then cancer recurs, you have to rip it all out.
Exactly.
One big disaster. So it's a safer path to have, not less invasive and also safer, the path you took, given there's a chance of recurrence, even a teeny chance.
Exactly. And for the people that you're mentioning that are not cancer related, people like vets that are coming back from war, a lot of them are sent to UCLA. They are known for repairing the faces of a lot of soldiers who were in Afghanistan and Iraq. And yes, but that does not have the underlying question marks.
Nice question attached
Yeah.
to it.
Exactly.
We have other issues.
If
Yes,
there,
they do.
if there were 3 takeaways from your book that you would want people to have, what would they be?
Oh, that's a good question. The 3 takeaways. I guess the first one is, before you ever get to that point, if at all possible, live your life in a way that you are connected to people, that you have people that you love and love you and care about you. Because if you stay connected to people when you have any kind of trauma or tragedy in your life, cancer or otherwise, you will have a support system. And I know that's easier said than done for many people. But if there's any way for you to be part of your community, doesn't matter if you have kids, doesn't matter if you're single, doesn't matter if you have no siblings, then be part of your community and have people that know you and care about you. That's number 1. Number 2 is, and I hate to say this because it sounds stupid and cliche, but you got to have a sense of humor. It's really what carried us through. I mean, we laughed. I cried a lot, as I said, but we laughed so hard sometimes in the doctor's office that one of my doctors would come in and she'd go, "What are you crazy kids up to now?" Because the little skeleton, head and neck skeleton, was on the shelf one day, and my husband and I were making it talk while we were waiting for the doctor. I'm sitting here with a giant hole in my face. I don't know what my outcome's going to be, and we're in hysterical laughter about this little skeleton head that we're making say stupid things. You have to have a sense of humor and be somewhat playful, because the dark times are going to be there and they have to have something balance them out. The third thing is that when all is said and done, I guess it's what we were talking about before, gratitude. Gratitude is what has carried me through everything, because no matter how bad it has been for me, there's always somebody that is in worse shape than I am. And sadly, I have seen them in the doctor's office. I've seen them in the mall. There's always somebody that's in worse pain than you are. And I am so grateful at all the good fortune I have had, even though I've had this. There's more good fortune than not. And as a little side note, a little asterisk number 4 that is attached to all of that, and I was just telling this to somebody the other day, but I don't wear white underwear anymore. I used to have my normal underwear, and then I would have my cute little pair with flowers on it or with little stars, and I would wear those on special occasions. All of my underwear is special. Every day is special occasion underwear day. I think I have one white pair to wear under white pants. And I even stopped doing that, because it's like, you know what? You can see my cute panties underneath the stripes and the stars or the flowers or the dogs. Enjoy yourself. So that's my way of celebrating. I don't wear white underwear anymore.
Do you have a copy of your book handy so everybody can see it?
I do.